911, Big 550, KTRS. Henry Bushkin was the attorney for Johnny Carson for 18 years. He has written a tell-all book called Johnny Carson, and he is supposed to be our guest 2 minutes ago. So our rule is fast approaching. We got, another 30 seconds, and then we're moving on? This book is getting a lot of attention in the fact that Henry Bushkin says that he gained Johnny Carson's confidence because in 1970, he helped Johnny Carson break into Frank Gifford's apartment because he was convinced that his wife, Johnny Carson's wife, was having an affair with Frank Gifford. And they became fast friends and then therefore became his attorney, and that is where the book starts. The book is called Johnny Carson. Harry Bushkin, our guest. Henry, you're on the Big 550 KTRS. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. How is it that you want us to believe that Johnny Carson pulled an O.J. Simpson and tried to break into Frank Gifford's apartment?
Hardly an O.J. Simpson. Hardly. It was a private investigator and several others, including me, who went to this apartment, which was suspected to be that of his then wife's, and it turned out to be that. Coincidentally, it turned out that three of the guys in the room were packing .38s that I didn't know about, and we left. No incident. End of story.
What was the idea? What did Johnny Carson...
This was New York. This was 1970, and adultery was certainly one of the two grounds for divorce. So for a divorce, you needed grounds. You needed adultery. This was to prove the adultery.
She claims now that that's just not true.
I don't know what to say to that. I wrote the book. I was there. She may say whatever she wants. God bless.
So the fact that she says this book should be filed under fiction, you have no comment on that?
No, other than all three of the four guys who were there are very much alive and very much around. And Joe Mullen is a well-known New York private detective who's still very much a private detective who led the so-called raid.
Henry, why would you write this book? If you were his lawyer, aren't all these things part of attorney-client privilege?
No. The privilege ceases on death. So it ceased way back in 2005. And I never intended to write the book. It was suggested to me by the lawyer who followed me representing Johnny, Ed Hookstrat, and he's the one who suggested I write the book. So you might say two of Carson's lawyers thought it quite all right to do that.
So why'd you write the book? Wasn't Johnny Carson a very private man?
Yes, but I think he deserves a renaissance. I think it's wonderful that people are talking about him once again. The incident we just talked about happened 43 years ago. To me, it's like tragedy 43 years plus a lot of years in between equals some comedy. And that was my intent with that chapter. It was how I met Johnny. It wasn't intended to create controversy. But it has, and I'm sort of delighted by it because it's so silly. But controversy, I suppose, is a good thing.
Well, breaking into somebody's apartment with a couple of loaded guns, that's not comedy to a lot of people.
No, I said it was tragedy then. Tragedy. But if you put 43 years in between, you can get some comedy. That's all.
Yeah. You also, let me ask you this question. Did you leave things out of the book?
Oh, of course I've left things out of the book. Probably things that would be embarrassing to me, probably things that would be embarrassing to Johnny I left out in that sense. But look, the book is designed to show what our lives were like at that time. It wasn't written for anyone to say, well, these were good things you did or these were bad things you did. These were things we did, okay? This is just the way things were. And if Johnny were to read the book, I'm sure there'd be things in there that he would like, and I'm sure there'd be things in there he wouldn't like.
Yeah.
For example, President Reagan calling him to apologize for some screw-ups during the inaugural weekend in 1981 is sort of a cool way of showing how powerful Johnny is. That the President of the United States takes time in the midst of the Iran hostage crisis to call him and apologize.
Yeah. You also tell the story in the book about how ABC tried to get Johnny Carson away from NBC. Sort of interesting to look at that story through the prism of what's going on now with late-night television. But what happened, and why didn't Johnny Carson move from NBC to ABC?
Well, ABC at that moment in time said, whatever you're making, we'll double it. I mean, that was their opening offer. Whatever you're making, we'll double it. And at the end of the day, NBC not only matched that, but gave us ownership of The Tonight Show, plus all the previous Tonight shows that then existed. So ABC couldn't have given us that.
So that's why you ended up saying?
Yes.
Yeah. How much does this book go into the secession plan? Because NBC sort of leaves him out. From all accounts, he wanted David Letterman to take over for him.
Well, I can't speak to that because my term with him ended in 1988, and the succession, as you describe it, took place in 1992.
But you can talk about Joan Rivers, though.
Oh, sure.
What happened there?
That was, I think, a well-reported incident at the time that he felt betrayed and didn't want to, never talk to her again. All of that's true. She was his favorite. She was the permanent guest host. And had she come to him and told him the circumstances of her being offered her own show on a competing network at the same time, in other words, an actual competition to him, he would have said okay. He would have said, look, Joan, do what you think is best. If she asked his opinion, he would have given his opinion, but obviously she never asked the opinion. But had she, and had the show failed, he would have gladly taken her back.
But the fact that he felt slighted because she didn't tell him.
Slighted? He felt more than slighted.
Is it true that on her opening night he sent her flowers wishing her well?
No.
Not true.
No.
And they never spoke. And they never spoke again.
No.
What about Johnny Carson's drinking? How much of it? When we all knew he was a drinker, but did we know how much of an alcoholic he was?
Well, no, nor really should you have, because the drinking, as you describe it, really took place when the show was taking place in New York between 1962 and 1972. Most people remember the show coming from California, and he was, of course, married to Joanna Carson at that time, and his drinking had fairly well subsided.
What do you think Johnny Carson would say today about the Letterman, Leno, Conan, O'Fallon wars?
I think he'd be amused by them because that never was part of his life. You see, he was so dominant. He was so much in command not only of his own network but of that time period that he was almost, he was almost imperious in the sense that you really couldn't touch him. Now, at the end, of course, that wasn't true because in 1992, I think circumstances were different. But the period during which I write, from 1970 to 1988, he was really all-powerful.
Yeah. Is it true that there's some inkling that, well, we got to run. I don't have enough time. I read the book. Henry Bushkin is our guest. The book is called Johnny Carson, longtime attorney, good friend, Henry Bushkin. The book is called Johnny Carson. Henry, good luck with the book.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You got it. 9:21.